Hello, and welcome to the first edition of the Divorced Duo. I'm one half of the Divorced Duo, John Knockling, with my beautiful and intelligent co-host, Christina Previtt.
Well, thank you.
Christina and I are owners of a law firm in central and northern New Jersey called Previtt and Knocklinger. You can find us at centraljerseyfamilylaw.com. And we practice primarily family law, a couple other little things like doing some wills and other estate planning, but primarily family law. So it should come as no surprise, we're here to talk to you about family law today. Now, this show is really for non-attorneys. So if you're tuning in to hear a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo that you don't understand, you're not listening to the right show. We're going to try to talk to you guys in a way that anyone can understand, regardless of whether or not you've ever met an attorney, sat down with an attorney. But it's very important that we say, and we'll say this many, many times, what we're going to tell you and the stories we're going to share with you do not take the place of legal advice. Your situation is going to be unique. Your friend's situation is going to be unique. Your child's situation is going to be unique. You should always go and speak with an attorney who actually knows what they're doing.
And by that, John means someone who regularly practices family law.
Right, which, there are many attorneys who do some divorces, but they do a very small percentage of them, and they may not be up to speed on everything that's going on. So
we call them dabblers.
Yes, we do call them dabblers. So just look for someone who actually exclusively or almost exclusively practices family law, and you'll be good. So before we get going, I think it's a good time to meet the Divorced Duo. So Christina, tell all the fine people about yourself.
Well, I've been practicing family law for about 10 years, and I like to say that's enough time to know what I'm talking about, but not too long that I've become bored and stuffy. I did practice for about 8 years in primarily Hunterdon County. And I did grow up in Middlesex, so that's sort of my old stomping ground, and I'm glad to be back there. But Previtt and Knocklinger practices law in pretty much most of the state. What would you say, we don't go further south of Burlington, but we go as far north as Bergen County, as far as you can get. So pretty much we're going all over New Jersey. I am a Rutgers girl. I went to Rutgers for my undergrad. I was at Douglas College in New Brunswick, and I went to Rutgers Law School in Camden. So I really am a Jersey girl. Not any of the negative connotations that would entail, though.
Good, I was about
only
to
the
ask
positive. And I have been practicing family law, so I'm definitely not a dabbler.
Well, that is definitely true. Well, a little bit about myself. I'm actually from Texas. I'm a transplant here, an immigrant, as I like to say, from the nation of Texas. And I've been here since 2001. I went to undergrad at Texas A&M and came up here to go to law school at Seton Hall, and for some reason I could not escape the gravitational pull of New Jersey. So I'm here. So after I left law school, I went and worked for a judge in New Brunswick who was a family court judge. And for whatever reason, it stuck, and I've practiced family law ever since. I was very fortunate about a year ago to meet the work love of my life, Christina.
Aw, shucks.
We've been together ever since. Now, a story I always love to tell people when they ask how Christina and I met. We actually met as adversaries on a case that we had together about, 5 years ago?
I think so.
And, we always laugh about it. It's a really, in our opinion, it's a famous case because it's a case where our clients spent thousands and thousands of dollars fighting over believe it or not, a crock pot.
Yes.
A $30 crock pot that you could go and buy at Target.
Yeah, so that is now referred to as the crock pot case. And just to demonstrate John's talents in settling, because that's really ultimately the goal in every case is to settle, he made the wonderful suggestion that when this crock pot issue surfaced and then resurfaced again and again, that maybe the solution to that problem was for us to just go out and buy them a new crock pot, and I thought that was genius. Turns out we didn't have to do that. My client did inform me that she found the crock pot. There was one problem. The lid was missing.
Of course it was.
I think we later resolved that as well. So I think they both went on to live happily ever after, not with each other, but on their own. So that we considered that to be a success.
Well, and we met, so that's definitely, should thank our clients for that.
Yes, and John says I wasn't terribly nice to him during our first conversation.
No,
but-
you were downright mean.
Well.
Downright mean, kind of nasty too. But you know what? You can be pretty aggressive over there.
Sometimes it has to happen.
So, as I mentioned before, this is our first show, and you're probably listening to us in the morning, but I will tell you, because we are brutally honest, both of us, we are not taping this in the morning because we are not morning people. There is no way that we could be as fresh and energetic for you guys at 8 o'clock in the morning as we could in the evening hours. So, for now, if you have any questions for us, if you'd like to communicate with us so that we can answer any questions or address any topics that you would like us to address, you can always feel free to send us a tweet at NJFamLaw, or you can send us a message on Facebook at PNLawNJ, or you can email us at divorceduo@gmail.com. And I promise we will not name your name on the air, but we will address your questions. So just briefly, the way this show is going to work is that we are going to have a primary topic per show. And it's a topic that Christina and I have decided is really the hot topic of the day. It could be a general legal issue. It could be a problem that we're seeing in our practice. Whatever the case is, we're going to have a single topic for the show, and we're going to try to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to have war stories for you. And by war stories, I mean we're going to tell you what it's like to actually deal with family law cases in New Jersey, which we hope will provide some insight for everyone about what you're getting yourself into if you enter the family court system. And we're obviously here to answer questions, and we hope to have a little bit of fun too. As fun as you can have talking about this really difficult area. So anyway, so today's show, we're going to concentrate on cohabitation, and Christina's going to start it off.
Yeah, and I would like to add that we don't necessarily have to limit our topics to specific legal issues. I think John mentioned we don't want to just be talking heads. You know, we don't want you to feel like you're listening to the news. We want this to be pretty informal, and we want it to really be for the average person to be able to understand and take something from it and apply it to their own lives, whether it's maybe they're going through a divorce or certainly know someone who's going through divorce. We want it to be really something practical. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be a specific legal problem. It could be something non-legal that arises during a divorce, because as we know, a divorce proceeding it's really a family matter. It's not just a legal process. So definitely feel free to let us know what issues you'd like us to talk about. And we're happy to talk about those things as we experience them in our practice. So the issue of cohabitation. The reason that we want to talk about that is because it seems that there is a lot of discussion about it in the news right now. And in particular, what really grabbed my attention is that I saw a NewJersey.com article that had incorrect information, and I was really concerned about that being disseminated to the public. Because as we know, you can diagnose your own medical problems on Google, but chances are it's probably not very accurate, and you should certainly consult with a doctor before you decide that you need surgery for something. And really the same applies to a legal problem. Don't just assume that because something happened a certain way in your friend's divorce, or you read something in the newspaper, as we're going to find out is not always correct, or you Googled it, that you've solved your problem. It's always better to be safe than sorry, and at least consult with someone to find out, if you're approaching the problem correctly.
So let me ask you a question, Christina. How do you address the people when they come into your office and they're like, well, I read something online that says I'm going to get, permanent alimony or full custody? What is it that you say to them? Because they clearly think that they already know everything there is to know about the topic.
Well, chances are if they're coming into the office, they don't really believe that they know everything, and they're being smart and checking up, right? They're coming into the office to find out more information about that topic. But I'm not offended when people go online to get information. I think they should do that. We all do that. That's only natural in this technology age. But I'm only trying to emphasize, don't rely upon that. So, for instance, we're going to talk about cohabitation. I've heard a lot of people come into my office and say different things about whether they're actually cohabitating or whether they're not. And a lot of times it's incorrect information. So oftentimes we'll have a woman that comes to our office who has been maybe cohabiting with her boyfriend, we'll say, and she's getting alimony. And maybe according to the law, she's cohabiting, but she didn't think so because maybe her boyfriend was only staying at her house a few nights a week. But she forgot to mention that he bought her house. So, sometimes those issues can get a little gray, and it is important to share that with your attorney. And always, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have an attorney and you're afraid to ask a question because you don't want to appear dumb, or maybe they don't seem that approachable to you and you don't want to be embarrassed asking what you think might be a stupid question, I would say maybe you should consider whether you're with the right attorney, because you should feel comfortable talking to that person, and you should feel comfortable that you're not bothering them with any questions that may seem silly. Might seem silly to us as attorneys, but you're not an attorney, so you should always check and make sure that your understanding of the law is correct.
Well, on that point, I think this is a very important lesson to learn before you hire an attorney to represent you in a family law action. Whenever you go, let's say you're about to go through a divorce, when you go meet with attorneys, first question should go through your head is this person actually listening to me? Are they listening to me? And when I ask them questions, do they seem annoyed? Are they rolling their eyes? Do they seem like I'm asking the dumbest question in the world? Usually if the first meeting they're going to be doing that, it's only going to get worse from there on out. And unfortunately, we unfortunately know a lot of attorneys that have done this a very long time and, do get a little moody along the way.
Sure, that's normal.
And you have to understand, there's going to be times when you call your attorney in tears because something happened, and you always have to keep that in mind. Is this the kind of person that's going to be able to talk to me and not make me feel bad for whatever it is that I'm calling to discuss with them?
That's right. You should feel comfortable talking to that person. I always try to compare it to me as a layman trying to select a doctor. I don't know who to pick. I don't know. How do I know someone's a really good doctor? I don't know. If they have a white lab coat on and they have a nice pair of shoes on, am I supposed to think they're a good doctor? I don't really know. And I'll be very honest, when I'm looking for a doctor, I will look online. And I do seem to feel a little more comfortable if I know what they look like and I see a picture of them. And I can't imagine that other people aren't doing the same thing when they're trying to pick an attorney. But since I am an attorney, I can tell you that certain things that you should look for is you should make sure that your personalities are compatible. Some people will just look through super lawyers and try to find somebody who's on the list, but I think, John and I can probably tell you that there are probably plenty of people on the super lawyers list that we don't think should be.
We're not naming names, don't worry.
Yeah, we won't name any names. But, that's probably not the best way to pick an attorney. Obviously, we've already mentioned pick someone who practices family law, but at the same time, you should meet with the person and really make sure that you feel comfortable with them. You're going to be talking about a lot of intimate details about your life, and you want to make sure that your personalities are compatible. Moving towards the cohabitation issue. So I'm just going to read the first line of this article that was on NewJersey.com. It was posted on January 29th, 2016, and it caught my attention because it's really been picking up a lot of traction on Facebook. And I probably wouldn't have paid much attention to it, but I read the first two sentences, and they were so inaccurate that I was compelled to read more to find out who this person was that was essentially giving bad legal advice in an article. And I'm not going to say the author's name, although some people might be able to find it and figure it out themselves. So the first sentence says that before 2014, which is when the new statute was enacted, a divorced spouse had to show that his ex-spouse shared a common residence with a new partner in order to prove they were living together and be able to stop paying alimony. And that actually is totally incorrect. And then the second sentence says, but under the Alimony Reform Act of 2014, which suggested this is something new, an ex-spouse no longer has to be living full-time in the same home as another person to be engaged in what we refer to as cohabitation. So those statements I found a little alarming, because I don't want people reading that and thinking that that's the law, because that is not the law. Most often what happens in our practice is that we get someone who comes into our office, and I'm going to generalize here. Most often it's the husband paying the wife alimony. So I'm just, for ease of reference, I'm going to refer to it that way. We'll mostly get husbands that come in because, the wives aren't going to come in and announce to us if they're living with somebody, and maybe sometimes they don't even actually know that whatever they're doing constitutes living with someone. But we'll get the husband who comes in and wants to know, what do I have to prove to show that my ex-wife is living with somebody? I suspect that she's living with someone. A lot of times they don't actually know. They just suspect, and they share with us, what evidence they think that they have that would tend to suggest, at the very least, that the ex-wife is living with someone. So the old law was that you didn't have to necessarily be all moved in, meaning, all your belongings there, your car's there every night, you're living there, you've got more than just your toothbrush there. That isn't the law. That wasn't the law before, and that's not the law now. So the takeaway really is that cohabitation is not all that clearly defined the way that it was defined before. Again, you didn't have to be there every single night. If you were there a few nights a week, then that was probably enough to get you in the door with most judges, to have further proceedings to determine whether there's actually a cohabitation happening and whether the alimony should be modified or terminated. So I'm not going to go into specifics about case law and statutes and things like that, because that's not really what our intention is with this program. We really just want to sort of give you in layman's terms what the law is. So.
Well, I really think this article, not dealing with the cohabitation issue in of itself, I think this article really is symbolic of what I see a lot, not just in newspapers, but also on news programs and elsewhere, where I'll see non-attorneys discussing legal issues in an overly simplistic way that provides inaccurate information. And the only place that I actually read articles that I feel like are really correct for the most part when they're discussing legal issues is in the New Jersey Law Journal, which non-attorneys aren't reading in the first place.
Yeah.
So I would just be really careful anytime that you see an article in a newspaper or you see a news clip and they're discussing legal issues, that a lot of times you're only getting half the story, or you're only getting a very overly simplistic explanation of what's going on. And this article, as Christina already pointed out, is a prime example of giving people some information that's not fully complete, but it kind of has the appearance of being complete information, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, sure.
It really looks like it's telling you what the law is, and that really could be dangerous.
Sure, and he does have some quotes throughout the article with recognized attorneys in New Jersey that practice family law that are good attorneys. And some of those quotes I would say, are accurate, but certainly the first two sentences that I just read were not accurate. So what I just want to emphasize from this article is that there was a new statute that was enacted, and I think a lot of people are already aware of that. Maybe not all the particulars, but they're aware that there was a new Alimony Reform Act that was established, and it made certain changes to the alimony rules. But I think what we want you to understand after this program regarding cohabitation is that previously the law was that you didn't necessarily have to be all living together, and that really has not changed. So I think most attorneys that are practicing family law would agree with me that the law concerning what constitutes a cohabitation has really not changed. It might have been further defined a little bit, but it's really has not changed. I think what is a little more questionable is what is the result of that? Not that there was much guidance before. All we knew is that your alimony could be modified or terminated, but it was very gray as to what magical line in the sand was there where suddenly you are considered to be cohabiting. And if you are, what happens to your alimony? So I don't think I think that gray is still there. It's still very much present. And as a result of that, there's still going to be a lot of litigation over this issue. But I just wanted to bring to people's attention that, it's not correct that it's suddenly easier under this new alimony statute to prove cohabitation. It's really not. And unfortunately, because there's not a lot of guidance in the case law or in the statute, we're still going to have litigation over what is cohabitation, and we're even going to have more litigation over what happens when someone is cohabiting. Does the alimony automatically terminate under those circumstances? Is there any room to modify it, or does the alimony just simply become terminated? So if you have an issue like that, we're certainly here to consult you regarding any specific questions that you have in your situation, but don't assume that just because maybe your next door neighbor was able to, have her boyfriend staying over the house a few nights a week and had litigation and didn't have her alimony terminated, that you're going to be okay too. So why don't we talk a little bit more about what do we tell our clients is cohabitation? Because we do give them some guidance on that issue.
Well, I think the first thing that everyone needs to realize is that, living with your mother or father or your child or even a friend usually is not cohabitation.
Yes.
When we talk about cohabitation, we mean a marital type relationship. A boyfriend, a girlfriend, someone you're in a romantic relationship with that's very intimate and personal. And basically, the whole reason that we have this cohabitation where you can have alimony suspended or terminated or modified if you are cohabitating is because of the fact that most people will get around alimony not terminated upon remarriage by just not marrying. But they're living with somebody like they're married. Everyone thinks they're married. It's the kind of situation where you see two people living in a house together, and if you don't know them, you would assume they're married because of the way they're living their lives. Sometimes it means that you've got joint bank accounts, you've got property titled in both names, you've got a bunch of things that are joint, but that's not always the case either. It could very well be that you've got nothing joint, but the way you're living your life, it's really this intimate relationship. And beyond that, it really is the economics tied to that kind of relationship. So for example, we have the new statute that came out, and we'll talk about this new law every once in a while, because I got to tell you, it's one of the number one questions I get from people is what's the new alimony law? What does it mean for me? Does it mean I don't have to pay alimony anymore? What do I have to do?
Yeah, there's a lot of men that are really excited about this new law because they're like, wow, all I have to do is show this guy is living over there and my alimony is going to stop.
Exactly.
It's really just not that easy.
So, it's the kind of thing where you really have to understand that once you are you either agree or you're ordered to pay alimony, it really only absolutely terminates upon remarriage, except in this situation.
Or death. Don't forget about that.
Well, of course, death. Of course, death. Which I'm sure there's more than one, and I'm not to stereotype too much, but I'm sure there's more than one guy hoping and praying for that to happen. But that being the case, cohabitation is really one of those things where people just don't understand what goes into having to prove your case. And quite frankly, that's one thing that we're going to get into a little bit after the break, is what do you have to do to prove your case? And we're going to talk about some cases we've been involved with and kind of the facts that have come out during those cases, just to kind of illustrate it's not easy. And quite frankly, it's expensive.
Yes, it's very expensive.
And the one thing most people don't want to do is to pay a bunch of alimony, then pay a bunch of more money to attorneys and private investigators and all these other people, only to find out you're not going anywhere with your claim.
Yeah, you really have to continually do a cost-benefit analysis to figure out how much am I spending and what's my potential result and how much can I save? Because you'll hear it a million times, it doesn't make sense to spend $25,000 to save $10,000.
No, well, I know I say that to people all the time, and half the time people look at me like with a blank face, because unfortunately, in our area of what we do, most people are guided more by their emotions
Yes.
than their actual business acuity, let me put it that way. I tell people every day, this is a business decision. Do you want to pay me $5,000 to go get you that crock pot that you want so much?
Absolutely.
Or do you want to, just give your spouse $5,000 or give your ex-spouse $5,000 and make it go away? Because
Sometimes they do want to pay $5,000 for the crock pot, though.
unfortunately, that happens far, far, far too often. But after the break, we'll be back to discuss the statute in a little bit more detail. You're listening to PANJ Internet Radio.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Anderson,
And I'm Laura Mangone.
and we are here to introduce the new show on PANJRadio.com. It's called
Food for Thought.
We'll be talking about restaurant reviews, restaurant pet peeves, catering nightmare stories, and a whole lot more.
Starting on January 15th at 1 p.m.
On PANJRadio.com.
Join us on the first Thursday of each month for Network Lambertville in Lambertville, New Jersey, the most productive open networking group in our area. At Network Lambertville, we serve award-winning wines, this month from La Vie, importers of fine Italian wines from Sicily, a fully catered meal created by Bitter Bob's Barbecue of New Hope, Pennsylvania, and fabulous desserts by Podge Cakes of New Hope. Network Lambertville is held at Green Birdie Productions Green Screen Studio at 21 Bridge Street in Lambertville, New Jersey. Networking with wine and past appetizers starts at 6 p.m., with dinner served at 7:30 p.m. All networkers get 1 minute with microphone to talk about their business to the group. There is no fee to join Network Lambertville, but we do ask for a $20 tax-deductible donation at the door to help cover expenses. Network Lambertville has over 450 members, but we do limit attendance to the first 50 guests. So please log on to www.networklambertville.com now to sign up and for more information. See you at the next Network Lambertville on Thursday, February 4th, starting at 6 p.m.
PANJ Radio serves Mercer, Bucks, and Hunterdon counties and the world, and we want to serve your business on our airways. Commercial rates start at just $50 for a 30-second spot on your favorite PANJ show. We run your ad not just once, but up to 7 times in a 1-week period. That's a lot of bang for your buck online. We will track the number of listeners your commercial gets, so you can measure how many new customers you get from airing it with us. For more information, please contact Rob at panjradio.com or call 609-460-4550. We can't wait to bring your company new local business on PANJ Radio.
Are you having fun running your business marketing? Or does online marketing and social media overwhelm you? Would you like to use Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, or LinkedIn, to name just a few online social marketing opportunities to market your business successfully? Amplify Your Voice can help. We work exclusively with local businesses in the PANJ radio target area of Hunterdon, Mercer, and Bucks counties, offering social media workshops, one-on-one coaching, managed services, direct online marketing, and web design. Contact us today at 973-615-5287 or email us at radio@ampyourvoice.com for a free no-obligation review of your online marketing. You can also visit us at www.ampyourvoice.com. Amplify your voice in a crowded market. Together, we will put the fun back in your business marketing.
Welcome back to the Divorce Duo. Before we went to break, we were talking about cohabitation. I just want to get to a couple questions that have come in. And first one we got by email, and someone was wondering, since we're talking about cohabitation, what if you're not married and you're living with somebody? Does the person you're living with have any rights?
Nope, not anymore. It's going to be a lot harder to enforce that. It has to be in writing. Quite simply, it has to be in writing.
Well, that makes it nice and easy, doesn't it?
Sounds like it, right? I'm sure someone will find a loophole to litigate that issue again.
Now when we say writing, do you think it's just enough, like two people write on a napkin, something about, I'm going to support you, and both people sign it? Do you think that's sufficient?
Well, it's contract law, so we don't want to get real technical again. In fact, we even have a safe word that if one of us starts to sound too much like a lawyer and, a talking head, there's got to be a safe word to sort of alert them that they're doing it. But I don't want to bore everyone with contract principles, but it has to satisfy all of the elements of a contract. So it has to define all of the terms, and that's really all I'm willing to say about that subject right now.
All right, so we got a question from Twitter that I think is a good place for us to start. And someone wanted to know, do you have to hire a private investigator to prove cohabitation?
Well, you don't necessarily have to, but it is helpful because depending on what evidence you have that the wife is living with the boyfriend, it might be your best way to gather evidence, because you can't just go to court and say, I think my wife is living with someone. That's not going to do it. You've got to have some objective proof that the wife is living with someone. So, and also, what we hear often is, well, my kids told me. I don't really think that's enough either. And I always try to discourage people, depending on how old the kids are and how comfortable they may be talking about it. It's probably a last resort to have to involve the kids basically testifying against their mother. But yes, to answer your question, I would always suggest that unless there's something else really concrete, like maybe they've posted on Facebook, they've proclaimed their love for each other, and the fact that they just bought a house together. I've actually had that happen before. But if you don't have anything like that that's concrete and objective, then probably your best bet is to have a private investigator surveil the house.
Before we go further on the private investigator, I think your Facebook comment was pretty interesting, because I can't tell you how much excellent evidence I find from people's Facebook pages.
It's pretty amazing what people post on there.
I just don't even understand. I mean, first of all, as someone who's not your friend, why you allow anyone to see all of your information anyway is beyond me. Because quite frankly, if I'm researching you, I'm looking at your pictures and I'm seeing what you were doing, a year and a half ago, because I'm trying to build a case for my client, and it's so easy for me just to run on there, that's really ridiculous. You really need to pay a little bit more attention to the fact that there are privacy settings on Facebook. But more than that is that even when people do that, they're still friends with many people that their spouse is friends with. And don't believe for a second that they're not providing that information to your spouse. I got to tell you, it is, in my opinion, the number one source of information for cohabitation cases. In fact, I have a case right now, which I'm going to talk about here in a little while, where I was at mediation. And one of the things that occurred was that on Facebook, I was able to see she was selling furniture, moving. And so we knew exactly when she moved out of her residence into the boyfriend's residence. We got information from Facebook page about when she went shopping for wedding dresses and when she was, starting to plan her wedding 8 months before she got married. So we knew, and because obviously it's easy to prove someone's in a marital type relationship if they're living together.
Shopping for a wedding dress.
And they're about to get married. So it's something I just wanted to throw in there. But also when you get back to the private investigator, Christina and I, about a year ago, we actually did a trial, a cohabitation trial. And in that trial, there were private investigators that were called. And what was interesting, just real quick, the way this kind of works is that you got to run into court and tell a judge, like, look, hey, my ex-spouse is cohabitating. If the judge thinks you have at least kind of a case, the judge will schedule it for a trial. And then you have a trial. But you have to open the door. You have to convince the judge there's at least enough. So that's really what we're talking about, the private investigators, to at least whet the judge's appetite a little bit to think, okay, there's something here, we need to look further. But private investigators, I gotta tell you, there's no rhyme or reason to what judges will look for. Because in this case that Christina and I had, all the private investigators had were pictures of a car in a driveway on random dates.
Yeah, it was a very, very short window. I mean, the guy could have been on vacation that week and just stayed over the house a few days. It was not much at all. In my opinion, I don't think that it should have gone forward, but it did. And, that's probably a topic that we could spend another hour on another day, is very unpredictable results when you go to court. But we won't get into that right now.
No, but it's important to know that when you're starting one of these cases, there's no way anyone could tell you what's enough.
That's right. And you know
We
what?
just don't know.
Be careful if you go to an attorney and they seem to have a crystal ball under their desk, because I'd really like to see that. I'm always amazed when I meet with a new client and maybe they've met with someone else who has assured them that they're going to get a certain result in court, because there's just no way that you can guarantee a result in court. And actually, one of our motto around the office is that we don't tell you what you want to hear, we tell you what you need to know. So if we're telling you something, it's certainly not to upset you, but we feel that we have an obligation to tell you the truth about your case and not just tell you something that you want to hear because it's going to make you feel good or because it's going to make you pay us a retainer and hire us.
Well, and that's really the problem, is that most attorneys will tell clients exactly what they want to hear just to get them in the door, and then here we are 6 months later, you're trying to settle the case, and you've got someone saying, but you told me I was going to get X, and I'm only going to get Y.
Yes, and you've already spent thousands of dollars assuming that you're going to get the result that they've promised you. But we don't want to badmouth lawyers. There's plenty of good lawyers out there that don't do that. But just be mindful of these kinds of things when you are researching lawyers and meeting with lawyers. So going back to the private investigator issue. So when you get a client that comes in and you're talking about the private investigator, they always ask you, well, what do I need? What do I tell the private investigator to do? How much do we need? What do you tell them?
Well, at a minimum, I want to see that the person that this ex-spouse is allegedly cohabitating with is actually in the house with them. So really, you need to get those kinds of pictures. You need to get pictures, obviously the car in the driveway sometimes might even be enough, but you really need to get pictures at all hours of the day and all days of the week. I actually think that you probably need several weeks of surveillance in order to really prove the case.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But private investigators are really expensive.
It is expensive. It's part of the cost. That's why you really need to be counseled. A client needs to be counseled as to, what's the remaining alimony obligation? How much is it going to cost them to try to reduce that or terminate it? So the private investigator cost is certainly part of it.
Yeah, and I would say that more times than not, to start a cohabitation case, you need a private investigator. Because, the last thing you want to do is to show up at your ex-spouse's house with a camera outside and sit in the car and take pictures, because guess what? the police are going to show up behind you, and you're going to find yourself with a restraining order.
Yes, and our next show will be domestic violence.
But, so the private investigator certainly is a little bit more trained on how to do it in a very covert way that most of us aren't very familiar with. So private investigator is very important, but once you get those pictures and you get into court, and the judge says, okay, I think they're at least living together. So what happens next?
Well, after the private investigator, I guess you see what evidence you have, and if you have enough to demonstrate that this person is, or at least that there's some question that this person is there most of the time and could possibly be living there. I always do Google searches. It's really amazing what you can find just on the internet about people. Maybe there's tax records, or could be some real estate records that might come to light that perhaps you weren't aware of. Again, social media, it's amazing what people post there, and you gather all of that, and it's like pieces of a puzzle. And if you can put enough pieces of the puzzle on the table to show a picture that there's at least pretty good suggestion that this person is living with someone, I think that's usually enough. I have found judges to be probably pretty liberal in granting a trial if there's a cohabitation allegation, if it looks like the person is potentially living with someone. And the reason for that is because if you're the husband making this allegation, and obviously we can assume that the wife is trying to hide it, you're not really in a position to have all of the information that would reveal everything. The wife is. So that's the reason that the court has to send the matter to a trial. So you end up with this period of time that we call discovery, a legal word. I'll try not to use too many more.
Safe words coming soon.
And, you get this period of time where you can exchange information and you can gather information that the wife has to produce to demonstrate whether she has, joint bank accounts with this person, if they have joint assets together, what her bills are, what her income is, if there's been any commingling of funds or sharing of funds with this other person, if she is supporting that person or even partially paying his bills, or if he's paying her bills. Are they going on elaborate vacations together?
Wait, you mean the ex-husband doesn't have to pay for the new boyfriend's new car?
No, the ex-husband does not have to do that.
Shocking.
But, at the same time, the wife shouldn't be supporting the boyfriend, but the boyfriend shouldn't also be supporting her. So that's really the issue is, and that's really where it starts to get a little muddy, is you can have a guy that stays over 4 nights a week, which the husband may find very offensive, and I've often made the argument that if he's staying there that often, he is getting some kind of benefit, other than the obvious, but he is getting some kind of benefit, in financial terms, where, I had a case one time where the wife made significantly more money than her boyfriend did. He had some little studio apartment somewhere, and he actually increased his lifestyle by living with the wife. So I made the argument that she was actually subsidizing his lifestyle. So those are just things to be mindful of. But really, I think where there should maybe be a brighter line, and where I think you start to get into territory where there's a better chance that the alimony could be terminated, is when you have that financial commingling. So, just having your boyfriend stay over the house a few nights a week, maybe there's some small financial benefit, but what could it possibly be,
That's almost never going to be enough.
Yeah.
It's really you're living together. And I think what's really important that people need to understand is, and you already touched on it a little bit, but once you kind of open the door and the court is looking, really it's the ex-wife now. And we're stereotyping, and to apologize to anyone out there that's on the other side of this, but the ex-wife is really the one that has to prove her case. She's the one that has to now prove that there's not cohabitation occurring, and she's got to look at all the lovely factors we have, and she's got to prove it, and that means producing bank statements, producing all the good stuff that's going to show that maybe she is. The boyfriend's over 4 nights a week, but she's the one paying all the bills. He has his own place. He's paying the bills. Really, where I always think where people really get caught is when they both don't have a residence and they're together a lot.
Yeah,
Because-
and again, you have to remember that when we use the term cohabitation, I think the average person thinks of that in terms of, is he moved in or not? And that's not really what that means from a legal perspective. What cohabitation really means from a legal perspective is he there enough, and is there some kind of, financial interdependence between these two people? So that's really what courts are talking about when they talk about cohabitation. So it's just not enough, from the husband's perspective, it's not enough to show that he lives there. And from the wife's perspective, it's not enough to say, but he's only here a few nights a week.
Right, and in addition, remember, you have to show that it's a supportive, intimate, personal relationship.
That's right, it can't just be a buddy or a roommate.
Or even somebody that, even if you are just dating them, if you only see them a couple days a week. I mean, it really, the court is looking for, don't forget, in a lot of times, this is a permanent termination of alimony. So the court's really going to look for a lasting relationship, which means a 6-month relationship is almost never going to be enough to do it. You really need
Unless
something.
there's some real financial,
Well,
significant
It would have to be-
financial.
It would have to be pretty good, but there needs to be something very, very concrete. I mean, some of the factors that the court would look at, for example, is the length of the relationship. And they would also look at, what do people out in social circles and family circles think about you? Does
Yeah,
everyone see you?
something that comes up a lot is there a ring? Oftentimes, I've seen a ring, and they call it something different. They call it a promise ring, or, whatever name they give it, but no, the wifey's walking around with a rock on her finger, and what is that, And I do want to point out something else, because I hear this a lot, and I will say that the guy has to be doing more than taking her out and buying her dinner. That's not enough. That's not going to be enough to consider her to be supported by this person.
All right. We also got another question by email. It really was, is there a way for alimony to be terminated if someone isn't living with a boyfriend or girlfriend, but rather, a parent or just a roommate? And I always, when I thought about that question, the answer is complex, but basically under the cohabitation law that we've sort of been discussing today, generally, the answer is no. Because that's really more for the intimate, personal, supportive relationships like marriage. However, that doesn't mean that there might not be a case, because you could make an argument, because alimony, as we all know, is because someone needs it. If you don't need it anymore, then there's an argument to be made it should be reduced or terminated. So you can't really do anything with regard to what we're talking about here today, but there might be other arguments you can do. And that really, the more important issue here is that that's why you need to go see an attorney that practices family law. Because the beauty of what we do is that the court is able to do whatever's fair and equitable under the circumstances, which basically just means whatever a judge in their gut feels is fair under the circumstances. There's not a lot of black and white.
Yeah, sometimes that's not beautiful, though, because
No.
sometimes
It's not
you
just
get
drawing
judges,
nasty.
who, let's just say they have a different idea of what's fair than the rest of us. So, and we touched on that a little earlier, is nobody can promise you a result at the courthouse. We don't know what the court's going to do. We don't know what a judge is going to do. And sometimes they do things that we don't agree with. So it really is true when people continually, throughout this whole divorce process, they try to beat into you that you should go to mediation and you should settle your case. And it's really true. It's because it's so unpredictable to be in court and really not be able to predict what a judge is going to do with your case. So I like to refer to it as just controlling the bleeding. Going to mediation and trying to compromise in some fashion that you can live with, rather than have something imposed upon you by a court.
Well, I think it's really gotten to the point in our practice that we can't actually even remotely tell people what's going to happen in court. It's gotten that unpredictable. And we have a lot of really good judges that try very hard.
Yes.
But, the problem, not to get overly political, but the problem is we don't have enough judges, and there's a lot of vacancies throughout the state. And, we have politicians that, fight amongst themselves. And the people that really get hurt are the citizens that need to go into court and get their disputes resolved. The whole reason they're in court is because they couldn't resolve their dispute outside of court for the most part. And if you just go to court and you're not given the proper amount of time to get a resolution, that's really can be harmful. Which leads me to a war story that I'd like to go over with you today, Christina.
That's right. I was hoping, maybe next time we could have some theme music with, machine guns or something.
I don't know. It needs to
I don't
be
know
a
if that's
theme
too
music.
dorky.
Why don't we just bring a real one in here and
Oh, yeah. That's a great idea, John.
we're gonna go get our licenses before next week. So here's the deal. So my war story is a mediation that I was actually at today with some very, very good adversaries, some of the best attorneys in the state. And it came to mediation. The reason it's relevant to this program is part of the case involves cohabitation. But what happened is we go into court, we present our case to a judge, and the judge doesn't really resolve anything, but it sends the entire case to mediation. Have you ever heard of such a thing, Christina?
Oh, well, recently, yes. It seems that it happens every day. So when you file a motion, just assume that they're going to not rule on anything, and they're just going to tell you to go to mediation. That's what you should expect.
And we sort of understand it on some level because the courts are really overworked. And sometimes the reason they send it to mediation is they have to schedule it for a trial, but they don't want to do that because there's not enough time to have trials. So they send it to mediation, usually with very good mediators that are really known in the county. But at this mediation today, this was a very, very typical high conflict mediation. And what I mean by that is, going into mediation, sometimes everyone goes in really wanting to sit around a table, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya and finalize the case. Other times, one person is really, really ready to go, and they're willing to compromise as much as they have to get the case done. But then there's times like today where both parties are so entrenched and so in their corners. It's like two boxers in a rink, and they're over there getting, towed off, ready to go. And they're just ready to come to the middle and start beating each other up.
Yeah, and that's the main event for them. So they're not ready to go home yet. They're not ready to be done.
Right, and not every mediator is really good for that kind of work. Today we had an excellent mediator who was really good with it, but I always find that when you go into mediation, which is the most popular way to resolve cases these days, is mediation, which basically means a third-party neutral attorney. It's usually an attorney, it can be other professionals, an attorney who sits down with the parties and their attorneys and tries to resolve the case. And there's all kinds of mediators in the world. There's the mediators that try to bring everyone to the middle. There's other mediators that tell one party, you're being a jerk, stop it. You need to go over here. And there's everything in between. So, one thing you always need to keep in mind if you start going through one of these cases, if you're unfortunate enough to go through one of these cases, is that you got to be really careful who's doing your mediation, and really ask questions of your attorney. Who is the mediator? Do you know this person? Do you know how they're going to be? What are you doing? So today we were there, and we brought our incredible associate, Marissa,
Marissa
Hirsch, who I'm sure you'll hear from at some point in the future. And I brought her along because I knew this case was going to be the kind of case where it really, really, really was just nasty on both sides, just really nasty. But I think some of the lessons that I kind of want to discuss with you, Christina, today, because what made the case nasty? What made the case nasty was these parties got divorced and had a settlement agreement that wasn't written very well. And what I mean by not written very well is on some of the major issues, there were conflicting provisions. In other words, in paragraph 1, it would say the sky is blue. In paragraph 2, it would say the sky is green. Well, is it green or blue? Well, we don't know because now we've got an agreement that's got two different things. There's other sections that didn't have enough detail. Like, for example, parties agreed to a number in terms of child support, but didn't tell us how they got to it. And so since we don't know how they got to it to begin with, Well, we certainly don't know how to modify it now because we didn't know how it originally came to.
So it's like you're starting from scratch.
Exactly. And then there was other places where they were just missing details. So what advice would you have for someone going through a divorce who's not an attorney, but they're being presented with this voluminous document called a matrimonial settlement agreement or a property settlement agreement? Those are the popular terms for what we call the
That's
final
right.
agreement. What advice would you have for
Well,
somebody?
I think by the time people are in their case and they're reviewing a property settlement agreement, it's, maybe a 30-page document, not particularly fun to read, a lot of legalese stuff, but a lot of really pertinent stuff that the client needs to make sure that they read and understand. Because even if you have the best relationship with your attorney and you have all the faith in the world in your attorney, you are the one that is bound by that document, not the attorney. So you really need to make sure that you read it, the entire thing, that you understand it. And this goes back to what we said at the beginning of the show. If you don't understand something, you have to be comfortable telling your attorney, I don't understand that. What does that mean? So that you are, when you put your signature on that, you're basically saying, I read this, I understand it, I agree to be bound by it. You can't later say, 2 years later when there's some dispute, well, I didn't know that that's what I was signing, or I didn't understand that. And in fact, you have to go to court, and many of you listening, if you've been through this already, you may recall that you had to go to court at some point in time after you signed it to get the divorce, and you had to say certain things to the judge, that you did read the document, that you understood it, that you signed it. So we just see far too many mistakes made when people are signing something that they don't understand, or if there's something in there that they misunderstood. I thought that the alimony was going to be one thing and it's something else, and I'll ask them, well, why did you sign it that way? Well, I don't know. I trusted my attorney and he said to sign it, so I did. So it's one of the most important documents that you'll ever sign.
Well, I think for most people it is the absolute most important document they're going to sign. And that's something, over the course of this show, we'll discuss more and more about, what things that you should probably look for when you're going through this process and things you should be cognizant about. But, I think we had a really great first show.
We did.
It was very exciting. We are going to be back next week with another really exciting topic.
That's
We'll be
right.
discussing child support
Exciting.
and emancipation.
Very exciting. It
Very
doesn't
exciting.
get more exciting than that.
So if you have any questions about those topics, please tweet us,
Yes.
email us, or Facebook us.
Email us. Let us know what you want us to talk about.
Absolutely, and we'll see everyone next week.